In order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and slow global warming, countries are pledging to radically reduce the use of fossil fuels by the year 2050, give or take a decade. Now, the good news, the supply of renewables is growing. The bad news, it's still not enough to meet growing global power demands. Consumers are already noticing energy prices here in Germany are some of the highest in the world. Economists predict that this will only get worse unless traditional energy sources are tapped to meet the demand. For Germany, that could mean even greater reliance on Russian natural gas, or it could mean reversing the 2011 decision to phase out nuclear energy. With the Greens hoping to be part of the new government, a return to nuclear looks unlikely. Across the border in France, well, the story could not be more different. The French president says that France will meet its carbon goals by 2050. Getting there will mean more, not less, nuclear energy.
If we want to pay for our energy at reasonable rates and not depend on foreign countries, we must both continue to save energy and invest in the production of carbon-free energy on our soil. This is why, to guarantee France's energy independence, to guarantee our country's electricity supply and achieve our objectives, especially carbon neutrality by the year 2050, we are going, for the first time in decades, to relaunch the construction of nuclear reactors in our country and continue to develop renewable energies. These investments will allow us to live up to our commitments as we conclude COP26 in Glasgow. This is a strong message from France. You can see it and we all sense it. We are preparing now to face the challenges of the future.
All right, we want to reopen the debate on nuclear energy tonight here on The Day. To do that, I'm joined by two guests. My first guest is Tim Yeo, chairman of the New Nuclear Watch Institute in the UK, and Ian Lowe, environmental scientist and emeritus professor at Australia's Griffith University. Gentlemen, to both of you, welcome. I'd like to start by asking you both for your reaction to the French president saying that there will be more, not less, nuclear power on the road to renewables. Tim, you first.
Well, I think it's a very interesting reversal of President Macron's previous position, because when he was elected in 2017, he said he was going to try and reduce French dependence on nuclear. But I think he's now recognized, as a growing number of people have, the urgency of the need to cut our dependence on fossil fuels, to reduce carbon emissions, becomes so great that we need all the available technologies. Obviously, that includes renewables. I welcome the fact we've got this very rapid growth in both solar and wind power. That's great news, and the falling price is also good news. But we can't do it just with those. We need nuclear as well. And remember that France, historically, is one of only two countries that's ever cut its dependence on fossil fuels as quickly as every country must now do. In the 1970s, in the oil crisis then, France and Sweden managed to cut their dependence on fossil fuels, and they did so by investing heavily in nuclear capacity.
Ian, what do you say to that? I mean, did he have to go for the nuclear option?
Because France, as a result of the historic change that Tim just mentioned, still gets 70% of its electricity from nuclear, it's difficult to see how France could do without nuclear on any reasonable timescale. But I don't think there's a strong case for increasing dependence on nuclear, given that the outstanding problems of waste management, of securing fissile material, and the economic issues remain unresolved, that nuclear is more expensive and poses extra risks to the community.
Yeah, so many issues remain unresolved, and yet we heard from the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency this statement today. We want you to take a listen.
For us, this COP was perhaps in history the first one in which nuclear has had a seat at the table and has been looked at and interacted with without these ideological burdens that existed before.
So, Ian, there you have him. He's saying right there, nuclear energy has come out of the cold at COP26.
Well, yes, but the problems remain unresolved. In 1976, the UK Royal Commission, headed by Sir Brian Flowers, said it would be irresponsible to expand nuclear energy until we are confident that the radioactive waste can be managed for what is effectively geological time. And Sweden and Finland are well down the track to do that. But the other countries that are using nuclear energy, the waste is still piling up, hoping that in some future decade, governments will negotiate a way to manage it. And in that sense, it's irresponsible to continue expanding nuclear energy until there is a proper process for managing the waste and securing it from the biosphere.
Tim, he has a point. We still don't know what we're going to do with these spent fuel rods and all of the waste that's produced.
Well, the waste is mostly a legacy problem. The new plants, the new Generation 3, Generation 4 nuclear plants produce much lower volumes of waste. But I have to say that the waste from consumption of fossil fuels is killing people right now through bad air quality. We're happy to continue with that. The dangers of the nuclear waste appear to be somewhere off in the future. I don't dismiss them, but I say that if we go on consuming fossil fuels, the consequences of air quality are such that many lives are being lost prematurely as a result of that. And we're not doing anything about that at all. So I think the situation the world faces now, humanity itself as a species is facing an existential threat unless we cut the consumption of fossil fuels. And I'm in favour of doing that through a bigger investment in renewables. But I don't see how that's going to be able to do it on its own within the timescale that is necessary to prevent dangerous and irreversible climate change. We need nuclear as well. I don't deny the existence of challenges about the waste, but I don't think we have time to debate those right now. It's what we do in the next 10 years. As the statements coming out of COP26 in Glasgow this week make clear, it's what we do by 2030 that is the first step, the first essential step to getting where we need to by 2050.
Well, Tim, I want to pick up on this notion of the new technology being safer. I know these modular reactors now that are being talked about that would be smaller and would be more almost like mobile reactors, if you will. Are they as safe as the nuclear power plants that we think of? I mean, everyone has images of 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl. I mean, are these modular units, are they 21st century safe?
Well, we obviously they haven't built any yet, but they will certainly have to go through the most rigorous safety assessment in most Western countries. The UK has a regulator who's absolutely rigorous about these things. But the new technologies used in the large plants are safe. They are safer than any we've had before. What happened at Chernobyl? What happened in Japan? That was more of an industrial accident, really. But the technologies we're using to build nuclear plants today are proven to be safe. They deliver reliable baseload supplies of electricity. In Western Europe, in the last few months, we've seen what happens when the climate conditions, when the wind is not blowing as expected, and there are electricity shortages, there are blackouts, and that's something which will happen increasingly if we continue to depend entirely on intermittent renewables. I'm in favour of investing in renewables, but I'm also in favour, at least for the next 30 years, of maintaining our existing nuclear capacity. Even in France, not planning to increase it, but they're planning to stop decreasing it. And I think that's what we should all be doing. Those countries which, the UK, almost a fifth of our electricity comes from nuclear, we need to maintain that. And if we don't invest in nuclear now, the existing capacity will diminish, and in 20 years' time, it will all gone.
Ian, what do you say about that? I mean, it seems like a rational argument that you can use the existing nuclear power infrastructure as a bridge to get the world to the place where we are completely dependent on renewables. What's so bad about that?
Oh, there's nothing intrinsically bad about it. It's an issue of priorities and what makes economic sense. I mean, the reason that nuclear is being closed down in the Northern Hemisphere is that just the running costs of established nuclear power stations are greater than the cost of electricity from new solar and wind. And large-scale solar and wind, even with enough storage to provide firm capacity, provides cheaper electricity than nuclear. But the other point I wanted to make is that we shouldn't be focused entirely on supply. We should be thinking about demand. I think it's entirely credible that we could live at the same standard of material comfort using half the energy we now do. And improving the efficiency of turning energy into services is still by far the most cost-effective way of reducing carbon. I remember the US energy analyst Amory Lovin saying, people don't want energy, they want hot showers and cold beer. And our priority should be dramatically improving the technology that turns energy into the goods and services that we want.
They want hot showers and cold beer, and they want energy bills that they can afford. You know, all over the world, energy bills are going up. And I'll just take Germany's example. You know, consumers have seen their energy costs double in a very short amount of time, and there's really no prediction of costs going down. What's the answer then for consumers? Consumers certainly can't be asked to fund all of this without getting something in return.
Well, I agree with you, and we certainly need to be more efficient in our use of energy, and including electricity. One of the challenges, however, is that if we're going to decarbonise transport, surface transport, that will almost certainly be done by greater use of electric vehicles, possibly hydrogen for heavier vehicles. But cars and light vans are going to be powered by electricity to get away from oil. So there's going to be more demand for electricity, whether we like it or not. And I must just take issue with the point about the relative costs. In the UK, which is probably the world leader in offshore wind, certainly one of the world leaders, there is not a single current offshore wind farm that can produce electricity as cheaply as nuclear does. Mm-hmm. The most recent really large wind farm in the North Sea, the Hornsea field, the cost of that electricity from that field, starting soon, is far higher than the most expensive nuclear plant in the UK.
Ian, let me just get your take on what has happened here in Germany. If we go back to 2011, after Fukushima, you know, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel came out and said, we are getting out of nuclear energy. And there was huge popular support for that. And if I compare where the public was then to where it is now, and this announcement from Emmanuel Macron from France, there has been almost no public response here in Germany to the fact that its next door neighbor is about to go with more nuclear in the future. Are you stunned that in the span of 10 years we've seen public sentiment change so dramatically?
Well, I think after Fukushima, there was a recognition that if even an advanced and technically sophisticated nation like Japan is subject to the problem of regulatory capture, so that simple, cost-effective ways of ensuring the safety of nuclear reactors are not implemented, then there is a risk with nuclear that doesn't apply to solar panels or wind turbines. But I think also consumers, even consumers who don't like nuclear power, would rather have nuclear power than freeze in the dark. So I can understand the change. I think it's really up to nations that are serious about decarbonising to sketch out a responsible plan that shows how consumers' needs are going to be met. Mm-hmm. And the International Energy Agency has a range of scenarios. Some show more nuclear, some say the same amount, some show less. They're all equally credible. It's a matter of policy choices by governments, which path we go down.
Yeah, and that path is going to be established somewhat when COP26 ends at the end of this week. We will see where we're headed. Tim Yeo, the New Nuclear Watch Institute in the UK, and Ian Lowe, environmental scientist and emeritus professor at Australia's Griffith University. To both of you, gentlemen, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.